You wake up at 6:47 a.m., 7 minutes before the alarm. Your body doesn't need it anymore. Years of the same routine trained it. Same company, same schedule. You tell yourself it's security. A good salary, benefits stability. On paper, you're doing better than your parents ever did. You earn more. You followed the plan. And yet you still check your bank app before buying groceries, while your boss just bought another vacation home. The promotion you waited years for came with a 3% raise, right? As inflation quietly erased 8% of your buying power. Somehow working harder didn't make life feel easier. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The problem isn't effort, and it isn't discipline. A salary no longer equals security, even though it feels like it should. What actually determines whether you feel calm or trapped is structure, how money reaches you, how fast it leaves, and who controls the timing. Once those mechanics are in place, the outcome becomes predictable, regardless of intelligence or ambition. I'm Alex. Today we'll break this down step by step, why higher pay often leads to the same pressure, how paychecks get carved up before you touch them, and what truly creates breathing room over time. Let's start with the part almost everyone notices, first earning more and still feeling broke. Earning more but feeling broke. You're earning more than your parents ever did, yet the money feels thinner. Salaries that once sounded like made-it numbers now disappear without changing how secure life feels. An $80,000 or $90,000 income used to signal comfort. Today, many people at that level still check their account before the weekend. What's striking is how consistent this pattern is. Professionals in their 30s and 40s report the same pressure whether they earn $50,000 or $150,000. The number changes. The stress doesn't. That's the first clue. This isn't about personal failure or bad budgeting. Look at the math people live with now. Pay arrives on a schedule, but costs arrive on autopilot. Housing, transportation, food, insurance, subscriptions, they scale quietly as income rises. You feel richer because the paycheck is bigger, but you don't feel safer because nothing meaningful accumulates. Here's the contrast most people miss. Income growth feels like progress. The financial position barely moves. You can be in the top income brackets and still be one interruption away from panic. That gap between appearance and reality is why the feeling persists. If earning more were the solution, this problem would disappear as careers advanced. It doesn't. And that tells you something important is happening underneath the surface. The salary chop fragmentation of income. Your paycheck never really arrives as one decision. It's broken apart before you touch it. Money shows up, then immediately disappears into lanes you didn't actively choose that week. Rent or mortgage pulls first. Taxes already left. Insurance renews. Subscriptions renew. The balance you see is what's left after the system has spoken. Take a common biweekly check, around $2,400 after taxes. Housing alone can remove half of it in a single transfer. Add groceries, a car payment, insurance, utilities, phone plans, and a few small subscriptions. By the time you notice the number, most of the money has already been assigned a destination. Here's the trick. Because it leaves in pieces, it doesn't feel dramatic. There's no moment where you hand over $2,300 in one painful transaction. It's $120 here, $140 there, $39.99, quietly renewing in the background. Your brain never registers the full cost of staying in place. That's why many people feel stable but stuck. You have what you need. You're not deprived, yet nothing builds. Fragmentation turns income into maintenance, not momentum. And when money behaves this way, it becomes very hard to see where control was lost or how to get it back. Illusion of prosperity through comfort. Nothing feels obviously wrong. You have a decent place to live. The car starts every morning. Food is in the fridge. Bills are paid on time. From the outside, it looks like success. From the inside, it feels oddly flat. That's the illusion. Comfort creates silence. As long as life runs smoothly, there's no sharp signal telling you something is off. You're not struggling, so you assume you're progressing. But comfort and progress are not the same thing. This is why the system works so well. It gives you just enough to stop you from asking harder questions. You're busy managing a lifestyle, not building a position. The calendar is full, the accounts move, and everything appears functional. Yet year after year, your financial footing barely changes. Notice how prosperity is measured socially. Nice apartment, reliable car, occasional vacation. Those markers say doing well, even if savings stay thin and flexibility is shrinking. You feel successful because the surface looks stable, not because anything durable is forming underneath. Here's the quiet tension most people ignore. Real wealth creates options. Comfort removes urgency. When nothing hurts, nothing gets challenged. And when nothing gets challenged, the system doesn't need to trap you aggressively. It just lets you settle. That's why so many capable, high-earning people stay exactly where they are not, because they failed, but because everything felt fine. Lifestyle inflation is the second trap. The raise hits, and it feels like relief. Finally, some breathing room. And for a few months there is. Then something subtle happens. The apartment upgrade makes sense now. The car payment feels manageable. The vacation you used to skip becomes earned. This isn't reckless spending. It's automatic. A $60,000 income supports one version of life. At $90,000, a slightly better version becomes available, so you take it. Rent moves from $800 to $1,200. A $200 car payment becomes $400. None of it feels extreme. Each choice is justified by the new salary. The problem shows up later. When expenses rise, they don't shrink easily. Fixed costs harden. Suddenly, the job you once chose feels required. You can't step back, cut hours, or walk away without real consequences. Here's the quiet twist. Each increase in pay feels like freedom, but it reduces your margin. Your lifestyle now needs that income level just to stand still. Miss one paycheck, and the stress returns immediately. That's why people making $150,000 can feel just as boxed in as those making far less. The numbers are bigger, but the flexibility isn't. Lifestyle inflation doesn't steal your money. It steals your options. And once options are gone, income stops feeling like a tool and starts feeling like a leash. Golden handcuffs and self-reinforcing choices. At some point, the job stops feeling optional, not because you hate it, but because leaving feels dangerous. The pay is good. The title looks solid. Walking away would mean unraveling too many commitments at once. This is where golden handcuffs form. You didn't get trapped overnight. You accepted one upgrade, then another. A larger home, a second car, better schools, higher insurance tiers. Each decision felt reasonable at the time. Together, they locked your income to your lifestyle. Here's the part most people miss. Progress gets measured by moving up, not by becoming freer. A promotion signals success even if it tightens your dependence. You earn more, but you also need more. That trade-off rarely shows up on paper. Look at high earners who still feel stuck. Some make $500,000 a year and still can't pause for 6 months. Their expenses require constant motion. The salary looks impressive. The freedom is thin. The system doesn't force this. It simply rewards consistency and discourages exit. Human psychology does the rest. Once your life requires a certain income, every decision bends toward protecting that paycheck. That's why people defend jobs they don't enjoy and delay risks they once wanted to take. The handcuffs aren't made of gold because they're valuable. They're made of comfort. And comfort, once it hardens into obligation, is very hard to unlock. Income versus expense gap as the real metric. Two people can earn wildly different salaries and live under the same pressure. One makes $50,000, the other makes $200,000. Both feel unable to breathe. That's not a coincidence. It's because salary doesn't measure freedom. The gap does. Freedom lives in what's left after life is paid for. Not the headline income number, but the distance between what comes in and what must go out every month. When that gap is thin, stress stays high, no matter how impressive the paycheck looks. This is why raises often fail to change anything. Income increases, expenses follow, and the gap barely moves. A bigger house absorbs the raise, a better car closes the space. The system stays balanced in the same uncomfortable way. Look at who actually has leverage. It's rarely the highest earner in the room. It's the person with surplus. Someone who can cover months of expenses without touching income. Someone who can say no. Here's the subtle shift most people never make. They optimize earnings instead of margin. They chase more money instead of more space. But space is what creates options. Once you see the gap as the real metric, salary stops being the goal. It becomes just one input. And suddenly decisions that looked small, rent choices, car choices, fixed costs, start to matter more than the size of the raise itself. A personal example of salary stress. A friend in tech was doing everything right. 6-figure income, stable role, clear career path. From the outside, it looked like a win. Inside, every thought of quitting made his stomach tighten. The reason wasn't the job. It was what the job was holding up. A large house payment, 2 car loans, private school tuition. Fixed costs stacked quietly over time. Walking away didn't feel bold. It felt reckless. When a promotion came with a $20,000 raise, the relief was immediate. Stress eased. For a moment, it felt like progress. Then life adjusted. Housing costs rose. A loan reset. One child needed unexpected medical care. A car repair turned into a replacement. Within weeks, the pressure was back unchanged. That's the pattern. Raises don't reduce stress when obligations expand faster than income. They just reset the starting line. This is why people at very different income levels report similar anxiety. The numbers scale, but the structure stays the same. Money comes in commitments, rush out, and whatever remains never feels like enough. Here's the quiet warning embedded in this story. If income growth doesn't create relief, it won't create freedom either. Without changing the structure underneath, higher pay simply feeds a larger version of the same stress. Dependence on the paycheck. It usually starts with a sensible decision. Get an education, build skills, increase earning power. For many people, that path begins with debt. Student loans turn future income into a promise already spoken for. Once the job arrives, the dependency locks in fast. The paycheck isn't just income anymore. It's the mechanism that keeps everything running. Miss one cycle, and the consequences stack immediately. Late fees, stress, difficult conversations. This is why changing jobs feels harder than it should. Even a short gap becomes risky when every dollar has a destination. You're not evaluating opportunities from a position of strength. You're calculating survival. The system rewards this state. Predictable earners with fixed obligations are low risk. They show up, perform, and keep the cycle moving. But predictability cuts both ways. When income is required to maintain basic stability, risk-taking disappears. Notice what becomes impossible. Starting a business, taking a lower-paying role to gain leverage later, investing time instead of money. All of it feels irresponsible when there's no buffer. Here's the subtle shift. At that point, the job stops being a choice and becomes infrastructure. You're not working to build freedom. You're working to prevent collapse. And when income's primary purpose is defense, it's very hard to use it to build anything else. Why the system prefers paycheck dependence. Predictable people are valuable, not because they earn the most, but because they behave consistently. When your income must arrive on time to keep life running, your choice is narrow. You show up, you comply, you avoid disruption. Banks like this. So do landlords, insurers, lenders, and subscription businesses. Fixed monthly payments from steady earners are clean, reliable cash flow. From their perspective, a household living paycheck to paycheck isn't risky. It's ideal. This is why so much of modern finance is built around automatic withdrawal. Mortgages, car loans, insurance premiums, streaming services, phone plans. Money leaves before you actively decide. The less friction involved, the more stable the revenue. Here's the contrast worth noticing. Someone with savings can pause, negotiate, or walk away. Someone without it can't. Dependence removes leverage quietly without drama. When most of your income is already promised, risk becomes unacceptable. You can't take time to learn something new. You can't absorb a short-term setback. Even small disruptions feel dangerous. That's the real advantage the system gains. Not control through force, but through structure. When people need their paycheck to survive, the system doesn't need to push. Behavior self-corrects. The uncomfortable implication is this. If you feel unable to step off the treadmill, it's not because you're irresponsible or unlucky. It's because dependence is profitable, just not for you. The fragility of modern financial security. Most people believe they're secure because nothing is wrong right now. The bills are paid, the job is stable, the routine works. But security isn't about today. It's about how long things hold if tomorrow changes. Ask a simple question: if income stopped, how many months would life continue without damage? Not comfort, survival. For a majority of professionals, the answer is measured in weeks, some in days. That's not a fringe problem. It's common even among high earners. This is why small shocks feel so large. A layoff, a health issue, a family emergency. The system isn't built with slack. It's built to run efficiently right up to the edge. When there's no buffer, every disruption feels personal, even when it's structural. What's deceptive is how normal this has become. Living paycheck to paycheck is framed as temporary or responsible, or just how adulthood works. But normal doesn't mean stable. It means widespread. Real security isn't a job title or a salary band. It's time. Time covered without income. Time to respond instead of react. When that time doesn't exist, choices shrink fast. Here's the quiet truth. A life that looks stable but can't absorb a pause isn't secure. It's balanced on momentum, and momentum only works as long as nothing interrupts it. Awareness as the first step out. The shift doesn't start with quitting your job or blowing up your life. It starts the moment you realize income and wealth are not the same thing. A salary is temporary. It exists only as long as you show up. Wealth is what remains when you don't. Once that distinction clicks, your attention moves, not toward earning more, but toward what actually stays. Savings, investments, time, options. These don't depend on next Friday's paycheck. This is where behavior changes quietly. You start noticing fixed costs instead of focusing on raises. You protect margin instead of upgrading lifestyle. A smaller apartment with breathing room begins to look stronger than a bigger one with pressure attached. The psychological change matters more than the math. When you build even a few months of runway, something loosens. Conversations at work feel different. Decisions carry less fear. You stop operating in constant defense mode. Here's the part most people don't expect. Awareness doesn't make life smaller. It makes it calmer. You don't need to reject comfort. You just stop confusing it with freedom. Breaking the salary trap isn't about escaping the system overnight. It's about no longer being blind to how it works. Once you see the structure clearly, you can start dismantling it piece by piece. And when dependence fades, choice quietly takes its place. Key takeaways. The salary trap isn't about income level. It's about structure. When money arrives, fragmented expenses inflate automatically, and comfort replaces awareness. Even high earners can end up dependent and fragile. The system doesn't need to fail you loudly. It works by keeping life smooth enough that nothing gets questioned, while quietly removing margin time and options. What changes everything isn't a bigger paycheck. It's recognizing that freedom comes from surplus, not status. From having space between what you earn and what you owe. From building time that doesn't require permission from an employer, a lender, or a billing cycle. Once you see the pattern, your thinking shifts. You stop asking how to earn more and start asking what actually stays. That mindset compounds quietly long before the numbers do. If this way of looking at money feels clarifying rather than motivating, you're probably the kind of person this channel is for. We'll keep pulling apart the systems most people live inside, so you can decide calmly and deliberately how much of them you actually need.